My name is Arlena, and I was born in a small town where the streets are quiet, the people are loud, and everyone believes they have the right to judge your life. I always thought my home was my safe place. I always believed family stands beside you, even when the whole world turns against you. But I was wrong. My story didn't break in one day, it started with small cracks. Cracks that I kept ignoring. Our town is tiny, the kind where the bakery opens before sunrise and the barber shop closes before sunset. People wave to each other even if they secretly dislike one another. And if one rumor starts, it spreads faster than the breeze that moves across our dusty old streets. I used to walk to my job every morning, a small school where I worked as a teaching assistant. The sound of children brought peace to me. Their little voices felt like hope, something pure, something untouched by life's bitterness. But the moment I stepped back inside my house, the air changed. My mother, Mira, is a woman who wears strength like armor. To outsiders, she is kind, patient, gentle. To me, she is a storm. She would look at me with a quiet disappointment, as if my very existence reminded her of something she wanted to forget. Arlena, why do you always walk like you're tired? She would say. Fix your hair. Look more cheerful. Why can't you be better? I never understood what better meant. I just knew I was never enough. Then there was Leanne, my younger sister. The golden girl. The one who could smile her way out of every mistake. In front of others, she was sweet like honey. Behind closed doors, she could turn sharp like shattered glass. She always knew how to get what she wanted. She always knew how to stay on the good side of my mother. And she always made sure I stayed on the wrong one. Whenever I returned from work, she would sit on the couch with her perfect posture, flipping through magazines. Oh look, she would say with a soft laugh, Arlena is home. I thought you got lost again. And my mother would smile, not at me, but at her. That smile always stung. One evening, I came home exhausted. It had been a long day at the school, kids preparing for exams, teachers preparing lessons, and me running around helping wherever I could. When I stepped inside, Mira didn't ask how my day was. She didn't even look up. Instead, she said in a cold voice. Why didn't you clean the kitchen before leaving? Do you think this house runs by itself? I looked at her in confusion. I cleaned everything last night, Mama. But before I could say more, Leanne walked in with a soft sigh. Oh. Mama, I forgot to clean it today. It was my turn. I'm sorry. But my mother didn't scold her. She looked straight at me. See? Even your sister is apologizing. Why can't you be responsible like her? I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to say the truth. But I kept quiet. Because in my house, my words never mattered. We sat around the dinner table like every night, but it never felt like a meal. It felt like a silent judgment. Mira spoke to Leanne about her day. About the neighbors she met. About how proud she was of Leanne's charm. I stayed quiet, chewing slowly, pretending the food didn't taste like sadness. At one moment, my mother turned to me and said, Arlena, you should smile more. You look dull. I whispered, I'm just tired. And she replied, You're always tired. I don't like that attitude. The truth was, I wasn't tired. I was hurting. But I didn't know how to explain pain no one wanted to see. Later that night, I sat on the small balcony outside my room. The sky was full of stars, but none of them felt close. They looked like distant lights, just like the happiness I once dreamed of. I hugged my knees and whispered to myself. Maybe tomorrow will be better. But deep inside, I felt a quiet fear. Something was changing. Something dark was crawling into our home, and I didn't know it yet. But my own family was about to push me into a storm I never asked for. The next few days felt strangely heavy, like the calm before a storm. I could feel something changing around me, but I didn't know what it was. People in our small town were acting different. When I walked to the school in the morning, two women outside the grocery store whispered something as I passed. Their eyes slid toward me, then quickly away, as if they had been caught doing something wrong. I tried telling myself it was nothing, but the uneasiness stayed with me like a shadow that refused to leave. At school, even the teachers behaved strangely. Mrs. Benton, who had always been warm to me, suddenly spoke in short sentences. She avoided close conversations and didn't ask how my day was, something she always did before. I tried to ignore it and focused on my work, helping the children with their reading and writing, but the tension followed me everywhere. It felt like the whole town was breathing differently, and I didn't know why. When I returned home later that day, I found my mother sitting with two neighbors in the living room. The moment I stepped inside, the room fell silent. My mother gave me a quick glance and then continued talking as if she didn't want me there. One of the neighbors smiled politely, but her eyes showed pity I didn't understand. I went to my room quietly, hoping the strange atmosphere would disappear with time, but it only grew heavier. That evening, while I was helping the children pack their bags at school, I overheard two mothers at the gate. One whispered, "I heard she always creates problems at home." The other replied, "Yes, and her own sister says she's difficult to live with." My heart dropped. It felt like someone punched the air out of my chest. They were talking about me. And the worst part was that they sounded so confident, as if they knew my life better than I did. The moment I reached home that night, I understood everything. Leanne was sitting with my mother on the sofa, looking innocent and sweet. Mira looked upset, her eyes filled with disappointment. She didn't even give me time to remove my shoes before speaking. "I heard something disturbing today," she said coldly. "People are saying you argue with your family. They say you disrespect the house. Did you do something outside again?" I froze. I had no idea what she was talking about. "Mama, I didn't." But before I could finish, Leanne interrupted gently, "Mama, I didn't want to say anything, but maybe someone saw how upset she gets. You know how she talks loudly sometimes. Maybe people misunderstood." Her voice trembled slightly, the perfect performance of a sweet girl forced to protect her big sister. My mother immediately turned toward me with anger, not toward the real liar sitting beside her. I felt something break inside me in that moment. I didn't shout. I didn't fight back. I simply stood there, shocked, watching my mother believe every word my sister said. Leanne knew exactly what she was doing. She knew how to twist her tone, how to appear gentle while planting seeds of doubt in my mother's mind. And my mother, like always, believed her without asking me anything. Later that night, I sat alone in my room, shaking. My hands felt cold, and my heart felt heavy. I kept replaying the day in my mind, wondering how the town suddenly turned against me. Then it hit me, rumors don't start themselves. Someone starts them. Someone pushes them. And I knew exactly who had that kind of sweetness in public but bitterness in private. For the first time in my life, I wondered if the people living in my own house were silently working against me. And that thought scared me more than anything else. The days that followed felt like walking through invisible fire. Nothing looked different in my house, but everything felt different. The silence became sharper, the walls felt colder, and every room held a tension that didn't exist before. Every time I entered the living room, my mother's eyes watched me as if she was waiting for me to fail. Leanne walked around the house with a soft smile, pretending everything was perfect, pretending she wasn't the one pulling the strings behind my back. Her sweetness in front of my mother became even stronger, and her cruelty toward me became even quieter, more careful, more dangerous. One night, I walked into the kitchen to drink water. Leanne was standing near the counter, scrolling through her phone. When she saw me, she didn't even look up, she just smirked, a small, sharp smile that cut deeper than any words. "People are talking, you know," she whispered, her tone dripping with satisfaction. "It's funny how quickly they believe anything." I stared at her, confused and hurt. "Why would you do this?" I asked in a trembling voice. She shrugged casually, still not looking at me. "Maybe they finally see the real you." Then she walked away, leaving me with a sinking feeling and 1,000 questions that had no answers. The storm grew stronger inside the house. My mother began criticizing me for the smallest things, my tone, my expression, the way I placed plates on the table. If I stayed quiet, she accused me of having an attitude. If I spoke gently, she said I was being dramatic. If I tried to explain myself, she walked away. Nothing I did was enough. Every day felt like a test I didn't know how to pass. Darren, our cousin, visited often during those weeks. He was the type of man who smiled too much and spoke too sweetly, the kind of person who made others believe he was innocent. But I knew there was something strange about him. He would sit with my mother and Leanne, talking softly, pretending he cared about our family. Yet whenever I entered the room, he would go silent and stare at me with a look I couldn't explain, a mix of judgment and calculation, as if he was measuring how much chaos he could gain by involving himself in our lives. One evening, I overheard something that made my heart stop. I was passing by the living room when Darren whispered, "People listen to Leanne more. If she says something, they trust her instantly." And my mother responded in a tired voice, "I know. I just don't understand what has happened to Arlena." I stood frozen behind the wall, my hands shaking. They didn't know I was there. They didn't know they were breaking me with every word. I wanted to walk in and defend myself, but I couldn't. My voice felt trapped in my throat, heavy like a stone. I walked back to my room quietly, feeling the weight of their doubts pressing against my chest. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor, wondering when my home became a battlefield. I wondered when I stopped being a daughter and became a problem. That night, when I tried to sleep, my mind wouldn't stop replaying every moment, every rumor, every look, every whispered conversation. I felt helpless, alone, and painfully invisible. I cried quietly into my pillow, afraid that even my tears would be misunderstood. I didn't know how to explain this kind of pain to anyone. I didn't know how to defend myself against lies spoken by the people who shared my blood. For the first time, the thought crossed my mind that maybe this wasn't just a misunderstanding. Maybe someone was shaping things intentionally. Maybe someone wanted to see me break. And the scariest part was, I was starting to break exactly the way they wanted. The morning it happened, everything felt normal, which almost makes the memory more painful. I woke up early, just like always, and prepared for work. The house was quiet, sunlight filling the rooms softly. For a moment, I let myself believe that maybe things were calming down. Maybe the storm would fade. Maybe my mother and sister would finally see the truth. I didn't know I was walking straight into the worst humiliation of my life. When I returned home that evening, I found my mother standing in the middle of the living room, holding an envelope. Her expression was cold, the kind of cold that sends fear straight to your bones. Leanne sat on the sofa with tearful eyes, fake tears, I knew that look well, and Darren was beside her, pretending to comfort her. The moment I stepped inside, all three of them turned toward me as if I had entered a courtroom, not my own home. My mother didn't waste a second. "Where is your money?" she demanded. Her voice was sharp, almost shaking with anger. I blinked in confusion. My money?" She threw the envelope onto the table. "Your savings are gone. All of it." Leanne checked the drawer this morning when she was looking for tape. The envelope was empty. My stomach twisted. My savings, money I had collected slowly over years, were gone. My hands began to shake. "Mama, I didn't touch the envelope after last night. I swear, I kept it safely in my drawer. I don't understand." Before I could finish, Leanne sobbed loudly. "Mama, please don't shout, maybe she misplaced it, maybe she forgot what she did." Her voice trembled perfectly, soft, innocent, fragile, a performance so flawless that even I almost believed she was crying. My mother turned toward me with a look I will never forget. "How could you be so careless? Or did you use the money for something you don't want to tell me about?" My heart dropped to the floor. "No, Mama. I would never do that. I didn't lose it. I didn't spend it. I didn't." But Darren stood up and cut me off. "Look, Arlena, we're family. If you needed money, you should have asked. There's no need to hide things." His voice sounded sympathetic, but his eyes were filled with something else, something greedy, something satisfied. I felt my face burning with humiliation. "I didn't take the money," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I didn't lose it. Someone else. Before I could finish, my mother slapped me. A sharp, loud slap that echoed through the room like thunder. I froze. My ears rang. My eyes stung. My mother's voice trembled with fury. How dare you blame someone else in this house? How dare you lie again? Leanne hid her face in her hands, pretending she couldn't bear the tension. Darren stepped beside my mother, whispering, "She needs to learn responsibility, Mira. Sometimes tough love is needed." I stared at him in disbelief. Tough love? This wasn't love. This was cruelty. This was betrayal. This was my own family tearing me apart, piece by piece. I couldn't stand there any longer. My vision blurred with tears as I ran into my room and locked the door. The moment the lock clicked, I collapsed onto the floor. My body shook violently as I cried, the kind of cry that comes from a place so deep it almost hurts to breathe. I pressed my hand against my mouth to stop the sobs from escaping, afraid they would come and accuse me of something else. I knew, without a doubt, that someone had taken my money intentionally. Someone had opened that drawer, taken every last note, and then made sure the blame fell on me. And the only person who had access to my room without hesitation was Leanne. But how could I say it? How could I prove it? In this house, truth didn't matter. Only their version of truth existed. That night, I made a decision. A small, quiet, desperate decision. I needed to leave the house, even for a few days, or I would lose myself completely. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to remember who I was before they painted me as someone I wasn't. When I finally stepped out to breathe in the cold night air, I felt a painful realization settle in my chest. Sometimes, the people who share your blood are the first ones to cut you deepest. And my wounds were finally bleeding. I didn't sleep that night. My pillow was wet with tears, and my heart felt heavier than I had ever known. The walls of my room, which once felt like a small comfort, now felt like a cage. Every sound in the house, a door closing, a quiet footstep, even the wind brushing against the windows, made my chest tighten. I kept imagining my mother's angry eyes, Leanne's fake tears, Darren's smirk that he tried to hide. I replayed the slap again and again in my mind until my skin began to burn with the memory. I felt like a stranger in my own home, unwelcome and unwanted. Around midnight, I stood up and walked to the window. The street outside was quiet, lit only by a single street lamp. The whole town slept peacefully, unaware that a girl inside a small house was breaking silently. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold my trembling body still. "I can't stay here," I whispered. The words came out so softly, but they felt powerful. It was the first time I said it out loud, the first time I admitted to myself that staying in this house was like standing in the middle of a fire with no way out. The next morning, I woke up early before anyone else. My eyes were swollen, my head hurt, and my body felt weak, but I forced myself to move. I washed my face, tied my hair, and sat on my bed, staring at the small bag I had taken out of the closet. I didn't want to pack everything. I didn't want to leave forever, not yet. I just needed space, a few days to breathe, a few days away from their accusations and unreadable eyes. I folded 2 sets of clothes and placed them inside the bag slowly, as if every piece of fabric carried the weight of my fear. As I zipped the bag, someone knocked on my door. My whole body froze. For a moment, I considered hiding the bag, but I didn't. I was too tired to pretend anymore. I opened the door, and my mother stood there, her arms crossed tightly against her chest. Her face held no softness, no apology, no concern. "Go make breakfast," she said. No greeting. No question about how I felt after she slapped me. Nothing. I swallowed the pain and nodded quietly. In the kitchen, I could hear Leanne humming softly in her room, her voice light and sweet, as if she hadn't destroyed my peace the night before. Darren wasn't there that morning, but I could feel his presence lingering in the house, like a stain on the air. I made breakfast silently, my hands moving automatically, though my heart felt like breaking all over again. When we sat at the table, the silence felt unnatural. My mother didn't look at me. Leanne pretended nothing had happened, talking about her day as though she lived in a different world. I ate quietly, keeping my eyes on my plate. When I finished, I placed my spoon down carefully, stood up, and said in a quiet voice, "I'm going to stay with a friend for a few days." The reaction was immediate. My mother looked up sharply. "Why?" I took a deep breath. "Because I need space." Leanne laughed under her breath. "Space? You're so dramatic." I ignored her. For once in my life, I ignored her. My mother's voice hardened. "You're not a child, Arlena. You don't run away when things get difficult." I looked at her for a long moment. "Mama. I'm not running away. I'm trying to protect myself." My voice trembled, but the truth inside it stood firm. "I need a few days." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't stop me. She didn't say a single word of comfort either. She simply turned her face away, as if dismissing my pain would make it disappear. When I walked out of the house with my small bag, the air outside felt cold but freeing. Each step away from the door felt heavy, but necessary. I didn't know where I would go or what I would do. I just knew I couldn't stay there any longer. For the first time in my life, I didn't look back. And as I walked down the silent street of our small town, one thought echoed in my heart. Sometimes leaving is the only way to survive the people who claim to love you. When I walked away from my house that morning, the entire town felt unfamiliar. The small streets I had grown up walking on suddenly felt larger, emptier, and colder. I kept my eyes down as I walked, afraid that someone might stop me, ask questions, or worse, repeat the rumors I had already heard. My body felt heavy, like I was carrying years of pain on my shoulders. But there was also something else mixed in with the fear, a strange spark of strength, small but alive. I went straight to the only person in this town who had ever made me feel understood, my childhood friend, Haven. She lived only a few streets away, in a small greenhouse with a warm porch and wind chimes that always sang softly in the breeze. I stood at her door for a long moment, my heart pounding. What if she didn't believe me? What if she had heard the rumors too? Before I could knock, the door opened. Haven stood there, her face lighting up the moment she saw me. But her smile faded instantly when she noticed my swollen eyes and the small bag in my hand. She didn't ask a single question. She simply stepped aside and said softly, "Come in." The warmth of her house hit me like a blanket. The smell of cinnamon tea, the soft glow of lamps, the quiet hum of the ceiling fan, everything felt safe in a way I hadn't felt in months. The moment the door closed behind me, my shoulders dropped, and I realized how tightly I had been holding myself together. I sat on her sofa, unable to control the tears forming again. Haven sat beside me, placing a gentle hand on my back. "What happened?" she whispered. Her voice held no judgment, only concern. And for the first time in a long time, someone was ready to listen, not accuse, not twist my words, not use my emotions against me. I told her everything, the rumors, the stolen money, the slap, the humiliation, the silence in my home, the way my mother looked at me as if I were the disappointment she never wanted. Haven didn't interrupt even once. She just listened, her eyes soft and filled with empathy. When I finally finished, she took a deep breath and said, "Arlena, you didn't deserve any of that. Not a single moment." Hearing those words broke me more than the slap had. Because for the first time, someone saw my pain. Someone saw the truth behind all the lies. Haven stood up and poured me a warm cup of tea. "You can stay here as long as you want," she said gently. "You don't have to face anything alone anymore." Her kindness made my throat tighten. I wasn't used to someone choosing me, supporting me, standing by me. That evening, I lay on the small guest bed in her house. The soft sheets smelled like lavender, and the window beside me let in the cool night air. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the soft sounds of the house, Haven in the kitchen, the kettle whistling, the wooden clock ticking steadily. Each sound felt soothing, like life was finally slowing down enough for me to breathe. For the first time in many nights, I didn't cry myself to sleep. I didn't worry about someone outside my door listening to my every breath. I didn't fear waking up to more accusations or cold eyes. I felt safe. Fragile, but safe. But deep inside, a truth was becoming clearer with every passing hour. I knew leaving home temporarily wasn't enough. I knew something darker was happening behind my back, something planned, something intentional. And I knew that sooner or later, I would have to face it. But this time, I wouldn't face it alone. That night, I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. The small cracks above my bed looked like broken paths, just like my life. I wondered why everything in my home felt heavy. Why every smile felt forced. Why every conversation felt like a storm waiting to burst. I was only 16, but I felt older, tired in a way children should never feel. When the first light of morning touched my window, I quietly sat up. Mom always checked on me before going to the bakery, so I knew she would be awake soon. I combed my hair with my fingers and tied it into a small ponytail. My hands were shaking for some reason. Maybe because the fear from last night still sat inside me like a stone. I walked out of my room, trying not to make any sound. But the moment I stepped into the hallway, I heard voices, Mom talking softly, Dad replying in a low, angry tone. That tone. The same one he used whenever he wanted to remind us that he controlled everything. I froze near the wall, my heart beating like a drum inside my chest. I didn't want to hear, but their words reached me anyway. Daniel, you scared her yesterday, Mom whispered. Amelia is just a child. I didn't scare anyone, Dad snapped. She needs discipline. You spoil her. Spoil me? I closed my eyes. I had never asked for anything. Not clothes. Not outings. Not gifts. My only wish was peace, and in our house, peace felt like a luxury we couldn't afford. Mom walked away from him and came into the kitchen, unaware that I was standing behind the doorway. I entered quietly, and she turned with a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. Good morning, sweetheart. I hugged her tightly. She flinched for a second, maybe because she wasn't expecting me to hold her like that, but then she wrapped her arms around me. Her warmth felt like safety. I'm fine, Mom, I whispered. Don't worry. She pulled back and held my face gently. You're brave, Amelia, but you don't always have to be. I wanted to tell her that I didn't know how not to be brave. Our home didn't give me the choice. After breakfast, I walked to school. The small town streets were still waking up, shopkeepers lifting shutters, children running with bags, neighbors greeting each other. Everyone looked normal. Everyone looked calm. I wondered if anyone would believe me if I said that sometimes I wished my house had walls made of glass, so people could see what really happened inside. At school, my best friend Harper waved at me with her usual big smile. She had a carefree energy that always made my heart feel lighter. But today, she looked at my face and her smile faded. Amelia, you look tired. Did something happen? I shook my head. No, just didn't sleep much. She didn't believe me, but she didn't push me either. She never did. Harper knew when to ask and when to stay silent. That's what made her different. That's why she was the only person I trusted. Classes passed slowly, but at least they kept my mind away from home. Still, every time the bell rang, a knot formed in my stomach. After school ended, Harper insisted on walking with me. She talked about random things, her kitten, her annoying little brother, her cousin's upcoming wedding, anything to keep me smiling. I appreciated it more than she knew. But the moment my house came into view, my steps slowed. Harper noticed. Do you want me to stay for a while? She asked softly. I looked at her kind eyes and wished I could say yes. But in my house, visitors were not welcome. Especially when Dad was in a bad mood. I'll be okay, I said quietly. Thanks. She squeezed my hand before leaving. And then I walked inside my home, feeling that familiar weight settle on my shoulders again, the weight of silence, fear, and unspoken truths. I didn't know that this day, this simple uneasy day, would be the beginning of something big. Something life-changing. Something that would shake my family to its core. But I could feel it. A storm was coming for us. And deep inside my heart, I knew, nothing would ever be the same again. The day I decided to confront them, my hands were shaking, but my heart felt stronger than it had in months. I had spent countless nights in Haven's house, replaying every moment of humiliation, every insult, every betrayal. And for the first time, I realized something important: staying silent had only given them power. If I wanted to reclaim myself, I had to speak, no matter how afraid I was. I walked back into my home cautiously, my small bag from Haven's house still clutched tightly in my hand. The house looked the same, the living room, the same sofa, the same walls. But the air felt heavier, like it was waiting for something to break. I saw my mother reading a newspaper and Leanne sitting on the sofa, pretending to be busy with her phone. Darren was nowhere in sight. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, my voice surprisingly steady. "Mama, Leanne. I need to speak," I said quietly, but firmly. My mother looked up, her eyes narrowing. Leanne raised her head with a sweet, curious smile, as if she were watching a drama unfold. I forced myself to look straight at them, ignoring the knots in my stomach. "Everything you believe about me is a lie," I continued. "The money was stolen, not lost. The rumors, the whispers, I did not start them. I have never lied to you intentionally. And I will not stay silent while lies destroy me." My mother's eyes widened, and I could see confusion flicker across her face. Leanne's smile faltered. For the first time, I noticed hesitation in her posture, a small crack in her perfect act. My voice grew stronger as I continued. "I have proof of what really happened. I have evidence that shows who has been manipulating every story, who has been hurting me behind my back. I am done being blamed for things I didn't do. I will no longer be silenced in my own home." There was a long silence. My mother looked down at her hands, almost as if she had forgotten how to hold them. Leanne's fingers trembled on the sofa arm, and her lips pressed tightly together. I could sense panic building inside her. The lies she had relied on for months were crumbling in an instant. I pulled out my phone and opened the messages, screenshots, and voice notes that I had collected with Nolan's help. "Look at this," I said, placing the phone on the coffee table. "Everything I've been accused of, all of it, is on record. It's time the truth is seen." My mother reached out, almost instinctively, but I didn't move. I let her feel the weight of the truth herself. For the first time, Myra's composure broke. She covered her mouth with her hand and blinked rapidly, like she was seeing everything clearly for the first time. Tears welled in her eyes, and I realized that my mother wasn't cruel, she had just been blinded by lies. The truth was harsher than she had imagined. Leanne sat frozen, her fake innocence gone. The carefully built mask of sweetness she had worn for months now hung loosely on her face, revealing guilt, fear, and shame. I felt a strange mix of relief and empowerment. For months, I had hidden my pain, endured their manipulation, and let them control how I was seen. But now, I had spoken. I had shown the truth. I had reclaimed my voice. "This house has always been my home," I said softly, looking at both of them. "But a home cannot be safe if lies rule it. I hope you can see that now. I am still your daughter, still your sister, but I will no longer allow deceit to define me. I will stand for myself, always." Silence filled the room. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was a quiet pause, the kind that comes when everyone realizes a balance has shifted. My mother's hands dropped to her lap. She looked at me with a mixture of shame and understanding. Leanne turned away, unable to meet my eyes, the weight of her actions finally settling on her. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. Not the freedom of leaving, not the temporary relief of hiding, but the deep, unshakable freedom of being seen, being heard, and being believed. For the first time in years, I walked through my house without fear. The storm hadn't disappeared entirely, but I knew now that I had found my strength. And from this moment on, nothing, not lies, not manipulation, not betrayal, could take it from me. The next few days felt like walking through a fog that was slowly lifting. Nolan had promised to help, and I trusted him. He had started speaking to people quietly, showing them the evidence I had gathered, the messages, the voice notes, and the proof of who had really spread the lies. I felt nervous, unsure how the town would react. Small towns have long memories, and once a rumor takes root, it can grow like weeds. But I also felt a quiet hope building inside me, one I hadn't felt in months. The first day the article was published, I woke up early, my hands trembling as I opened my laptop. There it was, the truth, written carefully and honestly. My story, my perspective, every lie that had been told about me, and every person who had intentionally hurt me was named and documented. I felt a strange mix of relief and fear. Relief because my side was finally being told, and fear because once the town read it, there was no turning back. By mid-morning, the first messages started coming in. Some neighbors apologized directly, some sent simple notes saying they were sorry for believing rumors. I read each one, feeling tears sting my eyes. People I had once thought were indifferent, or even judgmental, were now showing their true faces, ones that were kind, compassionate, and willing to listen. The weight that had sat on my shoulders for months began to lift slightly. But not everyone was happy. Leanne's phone buzzed constantly, and I could hear her soft cries through the walls when she thought I wasn't home. Her sweet, perfect image had shattered completely. Darren had fled for a few days, avoiding anyone who might question him. My mother, meanwhile, had come to me quietly. She didn't speak much, but the way she looked at me, a mixture of shame, love, and guilt, said more than words ever could. She finally understood the damage the lies had done, and perhaps for the first time, she truly saw me. Town life slowly began to feel normal again. People stopped whispering as I walked by. Some smiled warmly, others simply nodded in respect. I felt eyes on me, yes, but not judgmental ones. Eyes that saw me as I truly was, strong, resilient, and wronged, but not broken. The quiet whispers of suspicion that had followed me for so long were replaced by acknowledgement and truth. The most powerful moment came when Leanne's friends, who had unknowingly helped her spread lies, came to me to apologize. Their faces were red with shame, their voices shaking as they admitted they hadn't known the full story. I accepted their apologies quietly, not out of malice but out of understanding. I had learned that holding on to anger forever only makes you heavy. Forgiveness wasn't for them, it was for me. I realized something important: truth always finds a way, even when it feels impossible. Lies can travel fast, but the truth carries more weight. And the satisfaction I felt in seeing my family and town finally acknowledge it was more powerful than any revenge I could have imagined. I walked through the streets that evening, the sun setting in brilliant shades of orange and gold. The same streets that once felt suffocating now felt alive. For the first time in months, I smiled without hesitation. The storm had passed, and although the scars remained, the strength I had gained was permanent. And in that small, quiet town, I finally felt my place, not as the girl everyone doubted, but as the woman who had faced lies, betrayal, and shame, and had stood tall anyway. After the truth spread through the town, the atmosphere at home slowly began to change. My mother, Mira, had grown quieter, more reflective. She didn't rush to speak or correct every little thing I did anymore. Instead, she observed, as if trying to understand me the way she never had before. For the first time, I saw hesitation in her usual judgments, a sign that she was realizing how blind she had been to my pain. I still felt the sting of the months I had suffered, but now there was hope that things could heal. Leanne, however, was different. Her sweetness had been replaced by a kind of fragile, almost timid energy. She avoided eye contact, her usual confidence gone. I noticed her watching me carefully, as if unsure how to act. And yet, she began small gestures, offering to help with chores, trying to speak softly. I didn't respond immediately, trust couldn't return overnight. But I acknowledged these attempts silently, realizing that people can change when the truth shines too brightly to hide behind lies. One afternoon, my mother called me to the living room. I walked in cautiously, expecting another argument, another reprimand. But instead, she sat down beside me and said softly, "Amelia, I was wrong. I didn't see what was happening. I believed what I wanted to believe instead of listening to you." Her voice trembled, and I could see tears welling in her eyes. For the first time, she admitted her mistake without excuse or justification. I felt a rush of relief, but also a quiet sadness for all the months I had endured unnecessarily. I reached out and took her hand, feeling the warmth of her fingers, the human softness I had longed for. "I know, Mama. I know it's been hard for you too. But I need you to promise me, no more lies, no more believing only half of what you see." She nodded, and for the first time, I felt like my mother and I could truly begin to rebuild the bond that had been broken. Rebuilding trust with Leanne took longer. At first, I kept my distance, wary of manipulation. But over time, I noticed small, consistent efforts, her waiting patiently while I spoke, her stopping herself from sarcastic comments, her genuine attempts to be kind without expectation. Slowly, I began to respond. I forgave her, not because the betrayal was small, but because I didn't want anger to hold me back from peace. Even in the town, relationships began to mend. Neighbors who had doubted me now approached with smiles and kind words. Children I taught at school began to talk openly again, asking questions, sharing stories, and laughing freely. Life felt lighter. Each step forward reminded me that while the past couldn't be erased, it could be transformed into lessons that shaped a stronger, wiser self. By the end of that month, I had learned an important truth: family is not just the people who share your blood. Family is also the people who stand by you, who believe in your truth, who give you space to grow without fear. And sometimes, you have to step away, speak loudly, and fight for that bond to survive. Sitting by my window one evening, I looked out at the small town I had once felt trapped in. The streets were calm, the sun casting golden light over familiar houses. I realized that the home I had almost lost had returned to me, not perfectly, not untouched, but stronger because of the truths that had been revealed and the love that had survived the storm. I had survived the lies, the betrayal, and the humiliation. And now, I could finally live with my head held high, knowing that the bonds I rebuilt were real, honest, and unbreakable. Months had passed since the storm of lies and betrayal shook my home. The air that once felt heavy and suffocating now carried a sense of calm, a quiet reassurance that life could be gentle again. My mother had changed, not just in words, but in her actions. She listened before judging, she asked questions instead of assuming, and she held me close without fear or doubt. Seeing her transform gave me hope that even the strongest walls of misunderstanding can be broken when truth is finally recognized. Even the town, which had been quick to judge, now treated me differently. People who had once whispered and doubted now greeted me with respect and kindness. Children at school smiled freely, neighbors nodded warmly, and I could walk down the streets without the anxiety that had gripped me for so long. I realized that sometimes, people follow the louder voice, whether it's truth or lies, and the responsibility falls on us to make our voice heard, to stand firm, and to let the facts speak for themselves. The most important lesson I learned, though, came from within. I discovered that strength isn't about never feeling fear or pain. Strength is about standing up despite fear, speaking despite trembling, and protecting your own heart even when others try to break it. I had survived betrayal, humiliation, and manipulation. I had reclaimed my voice, rebuilt broken bonds, and walked through the storms of lies stronger than I had ever been. Sitting quietly in my room one evening, I reflected on the journey. The pain had been real. The nights of tears had been long. But every moment of suffering had taught me something essential, about resilience, truth, and self-worth. I realized that sometimes the people who hurt us most also teach us the lessons we need to grow. Not all scars are wounds, some are reminders of survival, courage, and the power of facing life with honesty and integrity. As I looked out the window at the peaceful small town, I smiled softly. Life would never be perfect. Challenges would always come. But I had learned to face them head-on, to trust in my own strength, and to never let anyone take my peace or dignity again. I had grown from a girl who endured lies into a young woman who commanded her own truth, and that was a victory that no one could ever take away. And so, with a heart that was stronger, clearer, and braver than ever, I stepped forward into my life, no longer a victim of circumstances, but the author of my own story, ready to face whatever the future held with courage, resilience, and unwavering self-belief. Support my channel, like, share, and subscribe for more emotional stories.